Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for one of our weekly AT&T webinars here. I'm Sam. I'll be moderating this presentation behind the scenes today. If you have any questions, feel free to ask away. There is a Q&A box on the screen. It is completely anonymous, and I will make sure one of our AT&T focused advisors reaches out to you after the presentation to answer any questions you may have had, either through phone or email. Today we have Kevin Wan on. He is one of our financial advisors, very well-versed in all of the AT&T retirement plans. He's here today to speak to you about the best and worst places to retire should you be considering relocating in your retirement after leaving AT&T. He'll be here to share some really great tips and strategies with you for that. Before he comes on, I want to quickly remind you, we are not AT&T here, so please keep that in mind. We are not affiliated nor endorsed by AT&T. We are a completely independent group of financial advisors. Speaking of financial advisors, I will be entering a link in the presentation. It'll pop up right above Kevin's head. Click directly on that. It'll guide you to our website. You can book a free 15 or 30-minute block of time with one of our advisors. You can also subscribe to our newsletter, read the many blogs we have for AT&T employees and retirees. You can subscribe to our YouTube, and you can also follow us on LinkedIn. We post a lot of content on both of those platforms that we really feel you get value out of it if you considered giving us a follow, and we would be very appreciative if you did so. And without further ado, let's jump right into it now with Kevin Wan.
Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. My name is Kevin Wan. I'm one of the certified financial planners here at Wealth Enhancement Group. One of the topics that comes up quite often amongst retirees is once they retire, should they remain in their current place of residence, or is there a possibility of moving out of state to another state, or perhaps even overseas? So today we're going to cover some of the topics that go into this decision. We'll cover some of the tax considerations, the different cost of living costs for different areas within the country and even overseas. And then we'll talk about the healthcare and economic considerations. But the bottom line is to make sure you have a well thought out plan and have a good plan in place. Now, there's a saying, without having a plan is planning to fail. And you really don't need to be in that sort of situation, even if it pertains to retiring somewhere else. A company like Wealth Enhancement Group, we do offer a complimentary, what we call the Retire Kit. So if you don't have a plan in place, we can certainly put that together for you. It is on a complimentary basis, but essentially what it is, it's gathering all those pieces of the scattered retirement puzzle, organizing the data, putting it into one comprehensive report, and then we're able to extrapolate those numbers into the future with various planning assumptions. And by doing so, we could actually show you what your retirement looks like year by year, all the way through life expectancy. We can even create multiple scenarios. We can create one scenario with you remaining in your current residence, and then scenario 2 could be with you retiring in a different state, or perhaps even a different country, as long as we have the data inputs for those two situations. So let's go ahead and get started. Now, a couple things to consider right off the bat is the tax considerations. If you plan to move to another state within the U.S., what is the different tax impact? Not only with property tax and sales tax and all the other taxes, it's really important that you gain a good understanding what those taxes will be in that new area that you may be considering. Now, regarding some of the, let me blow this up. Now, regarding some of the no state income tax areas, you can see here there's several states within the U.S. with no state income taxes. That would be Alaska, Florida, Nevada, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. So would it make sense to move to one of these states with zero income tax to lower your tax liability? Now, some of the high income tax states, California is certainly going to be one of them. Now, think about this. The federal tax rate, the highest bracket, is 37%. But if you add on a 13% tax rate, state tax rate, like California, essentially 37 plus 13%, that's 50%. 50% or 50 cents of every dollar that you're bringing in on an income basis during retirement could be going towards taxes. So you certainly want to take a look at that regarding taxes, and you can see some of the other high income tax states like Hawaii, 11%, New York, 10.9, and then New Jersey up to 10.75. Okay, now when we take a look at some of the states, let me blow this up too. You can see across the United States in orange, red, and the maroon color, those are going to be the states with the highest state taxes. And then you can see what the rest of the country looks like in the lighter yellow and then the light orange color. Okay, so again, that's an important consideration to take a look at. Okay, now regarding property taxes, right, there's different states. It does vary state to state. A state like Alabama could be less than $1,000 annually for a median priced home regarding property taxes. And then you may have a high property tax state like New Jersey, for example. Typically those home prices are more, and then as a result, that also equals a larger property tax bill. So when you take in comparison here, in this example here, we have a retiree couple in their 60s. So would you rather pay a property tax less than $1,000 like Alabama, or somewhere like New Jersey, which is just under $10,000? So that $9,000 difference over a 20, 30, or even a 40-year retirement can equate to hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra property tax expense. Okay, now when we take a look at the property taxes across the U.S., let me blow this up a little bit here so you can see this. These are just averages here, state by state, but be careful, because if you pinpoint a certain county, a city and county that you want to move to, you want to make sure that you understand what those local city and county taxes are. So for example, like Texas, you can see on the screen here, it shows the base property tax rate at 1.38%. But we have a lot of clients who live and retire in Texas, but their property taxes are hovering in that 2% range once those additional taxes are added on. And even a state like California, for example, to the left there, you can see the base property tax rate could be 0.7%, but then when you add in all the additional special assessment taxes for that local area, it could easily raise that tax rate to 1.2 or perhaps even 1.5. So it's important to do your due diligence, whatever city and county that you potentially are looking at, that you really get the breakdown of what the total property tax bill will be if you do decide to make that move. Okay, and here you can see some of the highest combined state sales tax. That certainly comes into play as well, right? The sales tax that you pay. So you can see Louisiana, 10.12, Tennessee 9.61, Arkansas 9.48, Washington 9.47, and you can see the list there. But keep in mind, even if you take a look at, for example, like a state like California there in the middle, it shows 8.98%, which is an average across all the counties within the state of California. The state sales tax for the state of California is actually 6.25%, but certain counties, they actually have those add-on sales taxes. So a city in California like Lancaster is actually at 11.25%. So again, it's really important that you really dial in to the city and the county that you're looking at so you can understand what that sales tax is going to be. Okay, now regarding housing and living costs, this is another major factor. It's important to understand the cost of living in one state versus another, or if you plan to retire overseas, it's really important to understand what that cost of living allowance is, or what that cost would be to live overseas, and how strong is the dollar in each of those countries that you may be taking a look at. And then during retirement also, if you plan to sell your primary residence and perhaps move somewhere else, and if you plan to get a mortgage, you have to know what the current mortgage interest rate is, because you may currently have a low mortgage interest rate now, but if you make that move to another state and if you have to refinance or actually get a brand new mortgage, what will that impact be on the mortgage interest rate? Okay, so here you can see some affordable, you can see somewhere like Arkansas, which is considered very affordable, right? The median home price there is about $250,000. But if you look at a high cost area like California, the median home price could be hovering over $750,000. So it's really important to understand what the cost of living and what the home price would be in the new area that you may want to consider moving to. Okay, so here's an example here. If you have a 60-year-old looking to perhaps sell his or her high-priced home in California with a median home price of $866,000, if this retiree is to sell his house for $866,000 and move to a lower cost area or lower priced home, like a state like Arkansas, where the median home price is $255,000. In this example here, Alex would be able to pay cash for that house in Arkansas, plus it would free up $400,000 of cash for him to either invest or to live off of during his or her retirement years. Okay, now when we take a look at the median home prices across the United States, let's blow this up here a little bit. You can see in the orange, red, and the maroon colors, you can see that's sprinkled more heavily on the east and the west coasts, and there's some pockets of the orange, red, and maroon towards the middle there. But you can see for the most part, most states within the U.S. are going to be towards that left half on that median price scale there. So does it make sense to sell your house and move to a less costly area and free up that capital, free up that equity so you can live off of during your retirement years? So a lot of things to consider. This is just one of the things to consider regarding the median home price. Now, regarding retiring overbroad, there's quite a few factors to consider. We do have clients, perhaps they were born and raised overseas, or there could be a situation where they were military brats and they're accustomed to living overseas. Or you may have some retirees that have vacationed year after year overseas and have explored different countries, and they really enjoy those countries that they visited during vacation. So that opens up the possibility of potentially retiring overseas. But there's a lot of considerations that go into that decision. First off is financial planning. What is the impact on your dollar, especially if you're receiving Social Security and a pension? How far will that dollar go in the country that you are potentially considering moving to? And then what is the tax impact, right? The country that you're planning to move to potentially, does the U.S. have a tax treaty with with that country? What are some of the advantages and disadvantages from a tax standpoint? So it's really important to understand that. The next element, of course, is going to be healthcare. Typically in the United States, we have fairly decent healthcare coverage. If you retire overseas, are you going to be able to receive that same standard of care regarding your healthcare? And then also residency and visa requirements. Some countries have very strict policies regarding these requirements, and then other countries may be a little bit lax on that. So it's really important to understand that to make sure you meet the requirements, because you certainly don't want to relocate overseas and then have to find out years later that you may not meet the requirements and have to move back. Regarding cultural adjustments, this is extremely important as well. If you've lived overseas before, you're probably a little bit more familiar with the cultural adjustments that need to be made. But for someone that's going to be first time visiting or even living overseas, it's important to be able to adapt to that culture, because if there's not a good fit once you move overseas, if it's not a good fit, right, the family's going to be uncomfortable, and the last thing you want to do is to have to move back, especially and incur all those additional expenses if that were the case. So it's important to make sure there's a good cultural fit, and that the adjustment to that lifestyle meets your requirements in retirement. Now, regarding the trial stay, a lot of experts, they do recommend this. Perhaps you could you could do a test run. You could live overseas for a couple months, still maintain your place of residence here in the United States, but perhaps try it out. Stay in an Airbnb or stay overseas for several months. Get accustomed to the local culture, and after those 2 months, perhaps at that point, you can make a more prudent decision whether you actually want to move over 100% to that new country. So a lot of things to consider there. Okay, now regarding the cost of living comparison, let's just take a look at some of the differences here of living in the United States versus perhaps retiring in Europe, Latin America, or in Asia. So you can see the average monthly expense in the middle column there. For the United States, we're using an example of $2,580. Now, if your living expenses are double that, or triple that, or quadruple that, you would simply just need to do the math so that you can see what your actual numbers are compared to some of these other regions that you may want to relocate to. So 2,508 for the US. You can see in Europe, the median range is 1,746, but even a country or region like Europe, there could be a big difference here. Like you can see on the screen, Bosnia could be $900 per month versus Switzerland, more at the higher end at $4,059. So it's important to understand the different costs of living based on those regions that you may be looking at. Latin America could be anywhere from $1,000 to $3,800. A country like Nicaragua could be $1,000 per month versus Costa Rica, which has gone up pretty significantly over the last, let's say, the last decade, as more and more retirees are moving there. You can see their average monthly cost to live there is $2,800. Now, again, if your cost in the U.S. is double that amount, you would just need to double all these numbers so that you have an apples to apples comparison. Now, Southeast Asia on the bottom there, you can see the range there from $1,000 to $3,200 per month. Somewhere like Cambodia could be less than $1,000 per month, maybe a little bit less developed versus, say, Thailand and Malaysia. Malaysia could be approximately $3,200. So hopefully this gives you a pretty good idea what the cost of living is in various regions of the world. But again, you would really have to dial into the exact region and exact country that you would be considering in, so that you could do an apples to apples comparison. Now, regarding mortgage rates, if you do plan to move to another state within the United States, if you do sell your home and you're purchasing a new home with a mortgage, it's important to understand what the current mortgage interest rate environment. It's currently hovering, plus or minus a few basis points, but basically about 6%. Currently with the Federal Reserve, they met last week. Those interest rates actually dropped 25 basis points, or 0.25%. So we're seeing the mortgage rates drop a little bit slightly. And if the Federal Reserve, if they're going to drop the interest rate, say 1 or 2 more times by the end of the year, that could put these mortgage interest rates at a much favorable position, where if you are considering perhaps selling your primary residence and retiring to a different state where you actually need a mortgage, that could be advantageous to you in the next few coming, in the coming months here. Okay, so real estate, it certainly plays a role in that decision, and it's important to understand not only the median price of the home, but also what the mortgage interest rate will be and what your monthly principal, interest, taxes, and insurance will be on a monthly basis. Okay, now regarding healthcare, this is another important consideration to consider because healthcare is definitely rising for retirees in the United States. So to have that same standard of care in a different state, it does vary state by state and even, of course, country to country. So it's really important to weigh what that healthcare cost is going to be out of pocket. Okay, now regarding some of the healthcare costs here, this is just a rough estimate. Some of the states with a high costs per month for their healthcare coverage versus some of the states with a lower cost per month. But again, this information is available. If you have a state that you have pinpointed, you could determine what that healthcare cost is going to be on a monthly basis. So that's another important consideration to take a look at. Okay, now here graphically you can basically see what the rising healthcare costs looks like. Of course, as we get older, you can see from left to right, those healthcare costs continue to increase. Now for 2026, Medicare Part B, we already know that's going to go up 11.6%. So currently the lowest that someone could pay for Part B for Medicare is currently $185, but with that 11.6% increase, that's going to raise that Part B cost up to $206. So it's really important to have a good plan in place to kind of map out what your healthcare costs are going to be, not only for the current year, but all the way through your retirement. Okay, now regarding inflation, when we run the complementary retirement roadmap, we do include an inflation factor on these plans, and we currently are using about 2.7% as a rate of inflation. But you can see, especially over the last few years, when we came out of COVID, that inflation rate was approximately 8%, but it has gone down since then. But it's important to make sure that inflation rate is planned into your plan. And you can see on the bottom there, fortunately with Social Security, there is a cost of living allowance built into that monthly benefit, but at the same time, those, the Medicare costs continues to exceed that rate of inflation. So a lot of moving parts to consider when making this decision, whether to stay where you're currently at to another state or perhaps overseas to another country. Okay, so as we wrap things up, it's important to consider all of these elements here. What is the cost of living allowance where you currently reside versus another state versus another country? And it's important to understand the taxes, not only the sales tax for each area, but also the property tax, and then also the income tax rate. What does that look like from a 30,000-foot view? It's important to take a look at the healthcare quality, some of the services that are provided in different states and different regions of the world, and then the housing affordability. How affordable would it be to live somewhere else versus where you're currently living? But the bottom line is, at Wealth Enhancement Group, we do offer that complimentary retirement cash flow analysis. So if you currently don't have a written plan in place, or if you don't have a plan that shows what it looks like if you remain where you're at versus where you plan to potentially relocate to, make sure you reach out to one of our team members and we can help you construct that complimentary retirement cash flow analysis for both scenarios, where you're currently living and then where you would potentially like to move to. We could actually create that scenario for you. Now, just to wrap things up, there's an interesting statistic: 74% of Americans aged 50 and above do not have a written plan for retirement. And really, there's no excuse for that, especially with a company like Wealth Enhancement Group. If you spend about 15 to 20 minutes with you, we can gather the data so we can create that complimentary retirement roadmap for you, so you could actually have a written plan in place. Okay, so I'd like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. We look forward to seeing you in the very near future. Take care. Bye-bye.